for reparations for victims of human rights violations to President William Ruto at State House, Nairobi.
One good friend of mine told me, you know, if you go this journey, you could easily be taken to The Hague because you are actually admitting that your government and those others have committed crimes. But so be it.
The protests that took place between June and July of 2025 has costed the country a whopping loss of about Kenya shillings 3 billion.
The head of state announcing that the government has allocated substantial amounts of funds to support the affected families.
We have already allocated Kenya shillings 2 billion towards compensation and reparation for those who have suffered verified harm.
Assisted by its AI integrated case management system, and will be in a position, Your Excellency, to begin making payments in as short a time as a week from today.
There are not many, Your Excellency. There are only 1,000, I think, the MCAs, the MPs, and everybody. But how can they make our lives unbearable?
Because if you use a bullet, that bullet is bought by the Mwananchi you are killing.
Key leaders who attended the event called for the reform of Article 37 of the Constitution on the right to assemble and demonstrate.
To develop this law that will operationalize and protect the rights guaranteed under Article 37.
That we've already put up a team to draft proposals on this particular article.
We will support for the betterment of our country.
Tunataka tujue hii haki hii ambayo iko ndani ya katiba, Wakenya wataifurahia vipi?
Because the act of demonstration is to make your point known, not to disrupt life.
Sometimes the greatest frustration by police officers is that they arrest someone on site. There is a camera showing that this person has banned Kikuyu law courts. What does the court do? They offer fines of about 5,000.
The Kenya Kwanza leaders also took a swipe at the opposition for politicizing the unfortunate incidents recorded since 2024.
And then be assisted by the police to carry out the demonstrations and say what they don't like and go home in the evening. That is the dream of this country. The millions of Kenyans who have nothing to do with politics.
And let's accept our sins. I know whom we used to complain about when I was in the street. And today is the same person who's telling me I'm reforming this country.
Meanwhile, President William Ruto has assented to the Division of Revenue Bill 2026, paving the way for county governments to receive 428 billion shillings in the 2026-2027 financial year. Tomorrow, President William Ruto is expected to attend the G7 meeting in France. Abdiaziz Hashim from State House, Nairobi.
Very well, that forms the basis of our discussion this morning. Many thanks indeed for joining us. Remember, our social media platforms are wide open. Let's communicate there. My name is Njue. Karon Joroge joins me on the sign language interpretation. Allow me, first of all, to rope in my panel of experts before we continue this conversation. Beginning from my immediate left, we have then Canon Dr. Scholar Wayua. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
She is a peace ambassador. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Just next to her, we have Karanja Muraya. Muraya is Executive Director, ACES Africa Center. Karibu sana.
Asante. Thank you very much.
One question for the both of you. I would like to pick your mind in regards to the President's speech, beginning with you, Daktari. He was very categorical that no amount of money can compensate life. And of course, the whole function yesterday has also attracted a number of questions. Why the compensation before justice? Of course, justice first, then compensation.
Thank you very much. And for that question, I just want to say that first, I followed the process and of course the speech of the President. And I want to say that the issue of reparation and it's not only merely financial, compensation, as of course he quoted yesterday. It has also to acknowledge suffering, restoration, and at the same time ensure that justice is prevailing to all the victims, and at the same time also looking at the perpetrators. And so, of course, the issue of reparation is not only for the financial benefit, but again, it has also to look at the restoration, the pain, and what each and every person and every family incurred. Thank you very much.
Karanja, they're saying that perhaps we put the horse in the cart in front of the horse. Reason being, he was very categorical that 2.5 for the right of life as a peace advocate and also as somebody who deals with a lot of young men and women in your organization. How do you reconcile this? Because the reason I'm asking the reconciliation, because some of these cases are still pending in court. We also had the Rex Masai inquest, which is still continuing, but there are now reparations amounting to about 2.5 million for each and everyone that was killed during this protest.
Thank you, but let me begin by saying that what we saw yesterday, the launch of this reparation and compensation framework by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, presided by His Excellency the President, and the statement that was issued from State House by His Excellency the President during the launch of that framework is commendable to begin with. It's commendable because it represents, or it actually is one of the most comprehensive reparation framework that has ever been produced in Kenya. And it is not the first time that the issue of compensation for violation of rights and fundamental freedoms is happening. It has happened before, especially regarding the 2007 and 08 post-election violence. But we have to also note that the compensation for violations that happened during the 2007-08 post-election violence were awarded by the courts. And this brings us to a point where we have to make a distinction between what is happening now and what happened then. And to put it in context, there are two approaches that can be used to provide reparation, restitution, restoration, or some form of compensations for human rights violations. And the first approach is the criminal justice system approach. And the second one is what has happened now, which is a transition justice-based approach to the violations. Of importance is that we need to look at the criminal justice approach to restoration, compensation, or to violations as being conducted within the legal framework of Victims Protection Act 2014. And that's a judicial process. A judicial process leading to determinations of the violations and awarding of some form of compensation or reparation. But a transition justice-based approach to reparation basically is not determined by the court. Is not based on a court determination. Is not a judicial process. And that's basically why this particular framework was designed or developed by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights in consultations with the victims and all the actors and stakeholders involved, including the civil society and government agencies, resulting in the statement that was issued by the President. So we have to make that dichotomy, or we have to distinguish between those two approaches, because then it answers your question. That one process is judicial or judiciary-led, and it happens within the criminal justice system. And the other one is basically a transition justice-based approach. And this what we have seen now is a transition justice-based or approach-based based on what we have basically been able to establish.
I don't know the names of those people who are being compensated, but I can argue that over 75% are young people. You'll be telling us what you do at ACES with young people to ensure that we are bringing them to the table as well.
Absolutely.
And of course, in such a function, we didn't see a lot of them.
Yeah.
But back to you, Daktari. I'm looking at what some of the people have been quick to note, including some of the victims, especially of the enforced disappearances. They are quick to note that, yes, in as much as we have been given this amount of money, that is not justice. We still want justice. I would like to pick your mind in regards to that.
Thank you very much. I want to start again by saying that justice, healing, and national reconciliation are 2 or 3 issues that come on board in this. And that human rights, you know, leave a lot of, when they are violated, they leave a lot of pain within and without, not only the physical harm, but also psychosocial, psychological, and especially among the youths. It leaves a lot of wounds and scars. But at the same time, I want to say, I would want to say that about the youth, and of course the question that is at hand right now is that there is no amount of money that can really heal somebody, a mother who lost a child. There's no amount of money. But of course, what I would say is that we look at all the side, like my brother has just said, that even as we celebrate this milestone, that this is the first reparation that we have probably had, but at the same time, we also bring on board the rest, the victims, and also the people who are also affected on board in discussion, because all said and done, and I want just to quote what the president said yesterday, that are suffering, of course, the whole idea of, he said actually, a mother or a parent who lost a child, you know, cannot also be healed by giving money. And I want also to reiterate on the, to speak on the same, that 2 billion cannot amount to my child.
But away from the money, the question is, there are people still demanding justice.
Yes.
Those who, especially the enforced disappearances. One of them was speaking yesterday, Bernard Kavuli, saying that, you know, we need justice. We know who abducted us. They tortured us. Before we can talk about any figures, we'd like to see some heads roll. We need to see some people in court. And as things are, there's no one in court.
And the truth is that healing, true healing, will comes when justice is prevailed, or when justice prevailed, and dignity restored. And so I would want to say, to align with the same and say, even as we get into the reparation and also compensation, let us also know that, as I have said, compensation also has many wings. There is the financial compensation, as we are talking about. There is also the psychosocial compensation. There is also this psychological compensation, which we should also discuss in our open dialogue, that of course also justice is prevailed. Because justice, if it is not prevailed in homes, in our country, in places of work, justice denied is justice
delayed.
Delayed.
Yeah, and you know, many people have argued that we should start with justice first. And I would like to pick your mind, Mariah, on this. I'm basing this on this. Eligible, remember, for the purposes of our viewers, is that not every person affected by demonstrations will qualify for the fund. Eligible ones, gross human rights violation committed by state agencies or public officers acting in official capacities. We're talking about extrajudicial killings, we are enforced disappearances, and also excessive force. It's perpetuated by state officials. And I think that is why the government decided, let's settle on 2 billion to actually give reparations for this. Ineligible are isolated criminal acts committed by civilians or rogue actors such as looting, vandalism, arson, civilian on civilian assault. This incident are explicitly excluded from the reparation framework and will remain strictly within the domain of the ordinary criminal justice system. And that is why I'm asking, should we have exhausted the judicial process first before we even think about compensation? Even if you go to court and argue your case, you're not given the compensation first. Justice first, and then if the need for compensation, then the compensation comes in.
Thank you. And I think that still remains an open option. It's an option that is still open to the victims of the violations. They can still go to court, because I do not think that this particular statement or even the compensation and reparation framework by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights prohibits any of the victims of the violations from pursuing justice in a court of law. But basically what this does, it does acknowledge that there are certain barriers that relate to the collection of the right or sufficient threshold of evidence, including documentation, that can be used in a court of law to successfully prosecute the issue of the violations, to its logical conclusion, to a successful determination that indeed violations happened. Because then, if you know how the country, or just even looking at how the country is, I mean, it becomes very difficult for you to be able to collect the sufficient level or threshold of evidence in terms of the right documents, in terms of the right statements from a scene of crime, like for instance where an extrajudicial killing has happened, and use it in a court, which is a criminal justice system process, whose entry the police is the gateway to the criminal justice system. So how then do you circumvent the police who are accused of having committed those particular violations to be able to successfully access and participate effectively within the criminal justice system and prosecute your matter in a way that now leads to a particular outcome, a desired outcome. So with that in mind, the issue of compensation and reparation frameworks kicks in. And it is important to understand that the one thing this framework has done is to lower the evidentiary standard, or the standard of evidence required for the compensation and reparation to happen. And what it has done is to adopt what the basis of what they are calling a reasonable. They only need to see that there's reasonable basis to believe. The reasonable basis to believe as the threshold that qualifies one or a victim of violation to compensation or reparation or even restitution. But if you went to court, the standard of evidence that is required is so high, and in circumstances under which extrajudicial executions or killings happen, or where enforced disappearances happen, sometimes it becomes very difficult for victims or their families to be able to provide this level of evidence for successful determination that indeed violations happened. And when then the court does that determination, the Victims Protection Act 2014 kicks in. And of course, the Victims Protection Act 2014 also provides for the establishment of the Victims Protection Board and a fund that is supposed to award some form of compensation to the victims of that particular violation through the judicial process. And that is the basic and most fundamental difference between this framework that was launched yesterday by His Excellency the President and the criminal justice approach.
I totally concur, because the burden of proof in criminal cases, the threshold is very high. Actually, it's beyond reasonable doubt.
Yes.
Yeah. And Doc, I'm looking at what the President said. He said, this is a solemn moment to make amends for harms never repaid. Do you, as a peace ambassador and part of the civic society, feel that yes, indeed, the state is finally taking genuine institutional responsibility? Because Going back to the 90s, we had the Sabasaba, we had the clamor for Katiba. You do remember a lot of people were tortured, including the likes of Martha Karua, the likes of the late Raila Odinga. But even the post-election 2007 happened, and we never had such kind of compensations. Do you believe that this is the time that the government had decided to make institutional accountability?
I would want to say yes, that it is a step towards the right direction. One, because where there is healing, of course, looking at the Bible, I'm also a clergy. The Bible says the Lord requires us to act justly and to love mercy and to walk amply with your God. From a clergy and also a scholar, I teach at St. Paul's University. From a clergy aspect, I want to say that if each and every side is given an opportunity to be able to, to express themselves, and if at the end justice prevails, then I would say we can say that we have started or initiated an historical moment. If, and this is my prayer, that this would work not only to a limited group of people, but of course across, that each and every person will feel that I have justly been treated, and I have and I have been dignified, because dignity is very important for every human being. Humanity and dignity. Recently, on Thursday, we had a very huge conference with at St. Paul's University. Of course, it was interreligious and intercultural, bringing on board both Muslims and Christians. But of course, the young people were the majority. And we are talking and saying that dignity is important, because if it is denied in every space, then of course each person feels undermined. So I want to say yes, we are on the right direction, if only we embrace it from an open space.
Mariah, let's now hit the nail on the head. The cause of all these issues is politics. Let's be honest, it's politics. Even the latest one at the Austin's Cathedral is tied to politics. The Gunism that was there was to a point attached to politics. Let me give you a practical example. A few weeks ago, we as Arsenal fans, we thronged Nairobi CBD in our thousands, in Arsenal jerseys and everything. You did not hear any looting of property. You never heard about people being mugged, you know. But any small function, civic space, a few people, maybe around 30 people, talking about the budget in Austin's Cathedral, a holy place, were attacked. And looking at the politics that we have had, especially when it comes to demonstrations, they have all been ugly because of the face of politics. I'd like you to speak on that.
Before I come to that, let me also respond to something that I think is important that you asked earlier.
Yes.
I think one of the limitations with this particular framework that you sort of alluded to is the eligibility criteria.
Yes.
Because the eligibility criteria also imposes an invisible barrier that needs to be brought out to the open. For instance, when they say that this framework for compensation and reparation only relates to violations that have occurred under Article 37 of the Constitution, relating to the right to assemble, the right to demonstrate, the right to picket, it basically then raises the question, what happens to violations that may have occurred under other articles of Chapter 4 of the Constitution under the Bill of Rights? Because of course the Bill of Rights covers from Article 19 to 15, Article 19 to Article 59 of the Constitution. Then what happens to all these other violations that may have occurred in that spectrum of the Constitution? And then when you say that you have to establish, or when the framework says that you have to establish that indeed these violations were perpetrated by state agencies or individuals acting for and on behalf of the state in their official capacity. Then how does a victim establish that indeed that person was on duty at the time when they committed that particular violation? Because of course, what we call the documents that would be able to prove that, that indeed this person was on duty at the time when the violations occurred, are in custody of the state agencies for which these individuals who committed the violations represent and acted for. You know, it becomes also now extremely very, very difficult. And then if you also look at the ineligibility criteria, then it also raises the question that most contemporary about what is happening in Kenya, because there is Guninization of repression under Article 37, where now we are beginning to see the emergence of goons, and we have heard from the cabinet secretary in charge of the Ministry of Interior that these goons are many, they are organized, and they are spread across the country. And most of them are sponsored and financed, are organized or put together and financed by politicians. So then what happens where these violations have been conducted by goons under the watch of state agencies, or where there is what we would say there is an issue of omission of the duty, or an officer fails to perform their duty to restrain the goons from violating the rights of these particular individuals who are picketing or demonstrating. Or even in instances where it has been reported that some of the state actors in civilians could be aiding these violations by the goons. Then what happens? Because that then is not covered under this particular framework. I think that is what you meant, and these are some of the questions that come up now. And of course, again, I know out there in the court of public opinion, the word on the street is the timing of this particular statement and the launch of the framework. Of course, coming days before the second commemoration of the Gen Z uprising, it also looks a bit suspicious that indeed this could be aimed at preempting any of this kind of appraising from recurring.
It's a good thing that you've mentioned that, because we are actually is my next question in regards to the timing of this. Remember, we also have Sabasaba and the Gen Z 25th commemoration, but we will be touching on that. But allow me to build up from where Muriah has left, and it is in regards to the Article 37, which allows us to assemble, demonstrate, picket, and even present a petition. And do we need any amendments to that? Because it seems that a lot of the framework has borrowed largely from Article 37. Do we need any amendments? Because during demonstration, we are not seeing the peaceful demonstrations. They are always interfered. And I do remember the first Gen Z protest that they had. We didn't have a lot of them. We didn't have goons. But when politics came in, that's where we started seeing looting of property. We saw deaths. We saw destruction. Do we need to amend the Constitution, the right to assemble, demonstration, and picket as it is?
Thank you again. I want to say that basically within the Constitution, if the rights of picketing, demonstration, and assembling are really followed without interference by the politicians, the Constitution gives space for people to picket, for people to demonstrate peacefully, and so it only comes or worsens when, of course, there is an interference, maybe for personal gains or for political gains, whereby, of course, you would start, like you have said, you start a demonstration peacefully, and then, of course, goonism or even other people with bad intention gets in. So if it would really apply completely without any interference, as it is it speaks about freedom for picketing, freedom for demonstration. And so it is only when we get in, and of course maybe other goons and other people get in and interfere with it.
Yes, and still on the, yeah, you can also touch on that, because the reason I'm asking about the amending that article, it's not the first time that has come up. I do remember even there was a time one of the politicians wanted to amend that because they said that in as much as people are demonstrating, they're not peaceful. And that is one of the core mandate of this Article 37. You have to be peaceful, you have to be unarmed. So in terms of amending the Article 37, because if at all a politician can, you know, pay a number of youth 1,000 shillings, 2,000 shillings, 500 shillings, and then they start looting, you know, they start, you know, stealing things from motorists, then I think they should be having an amendment that anyone who perpetrates any forms of violence should be held to account.
I think it's a good question, but if we were to open up the Constitution to amendment whenever there are such issues, or whenever such issues arise, then we would just have to leave the Constitution open to a lot of amendments.
The reason I'm asking this is because how many people have died just because of Article 37?
Yeah, absolutely. But
over 200 in the last 2-3 years.
The thing for me is that the Constitution speaks in generalities, but it's supposed to be operationalized by subsidiary laws that are created by Parliament. So perhaps what, for me, from the side of the state, what we should be looking at, because the killings and the violations, the excesses that we witness, whenever there are the right to, you know, to demonstrate, or the right to assemble, demonstrate, picket, and present petition happens under Article 37, is usually oftentimes provoked by the need to suppress the demonstrators for mostly political reasons, because the Constitution provides a very clear safeguard under Article 24 for the limitations of the rights. This particular Article 37 can be limited by using Article 24, where it is believed, or there is cause enough to believe, and this has to be lawful, it has to be reasonable, and it has to be justifiable, that the demonstrators were armed and they were not peaceful, for instance. But on the part of the police, and I'm talking about the duties and responsibilities that the Constitution imposes. On the side of the police, there is the Public Order Act. And the problem with Public Order Act, because it is oftentimes the one that is used to suppress the rights or the fundamental freedoms under Article 37, you know, the right to picket, Yeah. So what happens is that the Public Order Act was not revised after the promulgation of the new Constitution in 2010. And it remains pretty much colonial.
Exposed.
Yeah, pretty much colonial, and exposes the progress on the Constitution, or the progressive articles under the progressive Article 37 in the Constitution, to a lot of ridicule by the state actors. Now, what has happened, and I think where we need to put our energy more and focus on, is the review of the Public Order Act. And I say that fully acknowledging that there are already efforts that to develop a public order policy that are being spearheaded by the Ministry of Interior together with some of the non-state actors, emanating from the Maraga Task Force recommendations on police reforms. So the public order policy is being reviewed, is actually being enacted for the first time, for the very, very first time at the moment, together with the national policing policy, because Kenya has not had a national policing policy for the time the National Police Service has existed. And you know, the practice under public policy, in public policy development, is that you're supposed to have the policy first and then the legislation comes next, you see. But in this particular case, we have a public Order Management Act that predates the Constitution, but we do not have a policy. But now they are coming up with a policy without reviewing the Act, the Public Order Management Act. But the question you had asked earlier, whether there are efforts to institutionalize progressively some of these issues. Yes, indeed, this statement that was issued by His Excellency the President yesterday did mention that they did recommend the enactment of Reparations Act, which is a good effort at institutionalizing some of the progressive nature of, or some of the progressive issues that have been created by Article 37. And then now that there is the enactment or efforts to develop public order management policy and to develop a national policing policy. And also, equally, I am aware that the government is also coming up with what we are calling community policing policy, because even that has not had, although there are if you read the National Police Service Act from Article 91 to 97, it does provide for the community policing policy. And community policing, and then the Constitution also provides in Article 244E that there should be a community policing framework, but there is absolutely no policy. So these are some of the efforts that I think the government has taken to attempt to institutionalize the provisions of the Constitution.
But without a doubt, we really need to strengthen it, because we have a lot of pilferages in regards to that, because even the compensation itself was done in regards to that Article 37, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's why now they are coming up with the Reparation Act to be able, because we don't have a Reparation Act at the moment. And therefore, the only thing we have is the Victims Protection Act 2014, which is a judicial process. But in terms of a transition justice approach to reparation and compensation for violations of rights and fundamental freedoms, then that is, we do not have a law. And I think that's why the statement by the President coming from the launch of the framework suggests or recommends that we create or we enact a Reparation Act.
Doc, allow me to borrow something from Muraya there in regards to what we're expecting this year and this month, in the next couple of days. We're also expecting the Gen Z to hold their second commemoration. We also are expecting the Sabasaba protest as well, which have been there for, I think, for a number of years, almost, I think, 30 years now.
Yes, absolutely.
And in the civic space, from where you sit, are you worried because of what we are seeing now, politicians and goonism? I've covered 4 election cycles, 2007, 2013, 2017, and 2022. And I can tell you the goonism, 2007, 2013, we saw what happened, but there wasn't the issue of goonism as much as it is now. We are seeing even churches being attacked. We are seeing young men, you know, on the road stealing from innocent motorists. In the civic space, are you worried? We are headed towards 2 demonstrations. Also, we are headed towards 2027 election.
As a peace ambassador, and also as a clergy, and as a scholar, dealing directly with the young Gen Zs, with the young people, I would say that yes, we can't fail to be worried because of the past, because many times the historical past, of course, can reflect on the future and the present. So what we have seen in the past is really worrying. But I want also to thank God that we can sit and, of course, think about the reparation. And as I said in the beginning, it should not only focus on the monetary benefit for young people. We should think in a dialogical way. And as a peace ambassador, I will call upon each actor and each sector, and especially the state actors, the politicians, to call upon them and say that as religious leaders and as ambassadors of peace, we are the guardians of moral conscience. We are the guardians, and to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. And so at this particular time, we want to pray and to call upon every Kenyan, the Gen Zs, the religious leaders, the politicians, to look at humanity and dignity as a very important thing. We cannot afford. We cannot afford to lose other lives, you know, maybe because of demonstrations, if, of course, we can embrace and look at the Constitution and what Article 7 says in a peaceful demonstration, and of course we try to see whether the goonism, the issue of goonism, because basically when you follow, the issue of goonism is the one which actually brings about all these other issues. And for the young people, for the Gen Zs, when they come to express themselves, let us also look at the issue, and the issue of peace, because peace is paramount. Human dignity is paramount, and justice is also paramount. So we can be worried, but of course we are also getting a moment of like saying we are going in the right way through the Repression Act, whereby of course now we can say at least we are walking on the right direction, or we are getting closer to somewhere where we can of course say this person can be protected by this or by that. So yeah.
Still on the same, I'm really perturbed by some of the things that we are seeing. At the end of the day, as much as I'm a journalist, I'm also a Kenyan. And Muriah, I would like to ask this question. Do you believe government and government agencies are being honest? The reason being, and genuine, the reason being, we've had this issue of goonism. We had a senator attacked by goons. We don't know where they are. We had 4 churches have been attacked, including Osen's, the latest one. No one has been arrested. We haven't seen anyone presented to court. Are you honestly believing that government doesn't know exactly where these goons are, and it has no power over these goons? A practical example is the CCTV that we saw from Osen's Cathedral. You know, somebody asked me, these police officers guarding that place, why do they even have weapons in the first place? If they have weapons, it's to use those weapons in case they need to use those weapons. And you can tell me all those goons, in tens of them or even 100 goons that were there, no one was arrested, nobody was shot. But when it comes to the street protest, we have so many young men and women being shot to death.
Absolutely, and it's a good question. Of course, whether the government is being honest or dishonest is difficult to determine. But we can use deductive logics to try and argue that. In fact, it's not even deductive logics, because it's clear from the statement that was issued by the president yesterday, and it's an important one, very, very important in this discourse, that there was recognition, or we can even say now there is a recognition by the highest office in the land that there are police violations. There is police violence, and there is an attempt by the state to repress protests. And, and it almost looks like suspension of some facets of Article 37, repression of protests. And there's also now a clear commitment from the pronouncements, or from the statement that was issued yesterday, to move Kenya from mere documentation of violations to redressing the issues. I mean, that coming from the president is something. We can't say it's nothing.
But my point specifically is on goons, because a practical example in the Wetima church, I think in Njue.
In Njue, yes.
We did see police vehicles, we did see tear gas, and police said they were not responsible for that. And during the Osen's one, a few days ago, from the CCTV camera, there's something they can tell you.
Absolutely, and to say that the government does not know, and is to be dishonest to begin with, because then, of course, what happens to, the government superintends over everything, all the affairs, governance affairs in the country. So it would be able to know through the intelligence apparatus, the investigations, and so on and so forth, if there is any peculiar mobilization of people, financing and weaponization to suppress protest. It is difficult to say that they wouldn't be able to know, or they wouldn't have the capacity to know. But you also did mention at some point that is it politicization of every fundamental issue in this country, because we have seen during the issue of housing, there was a suppression of protests that resulted in deaths of protesters.
Yes.
We saw this lastly in most recently about the Ebola,
Yes.
and we had seen something similar in Embu about some people protesting or picketing outside a hospital, a health facility,
Yes.
And so on and so forth. Exactly. So we can't, we have been advocating for the government to first recognize that these violations are happening and to take responsibility. And I can say for sure from the statement, from the framework and the statement yesterday, that recognition has now been accorded. Now, at least we can say the government has acknowledged that these violations have happened. Are they committed by the police? The government has acknowledged that these violations are committed by the police. And that's why that particular framework relates to, in its eligibility criteria, to state actors, state agencies, and all those people working around the state. But in terms of the goons, I would say that indeed there is fear everywhere, not just with you, but everywhere. I mean, everywhere you go, that is the topic that is being discussed now. That coming before the August 2027 elections, we can see mobilization, we can see weaponization of suppression of protest. And it does not look good. And it is worrying. And I think I would hope that the political will that has been missing before, now that the president has come out clearly to admit that these violations have happened, including violations that have happened, and of course, under the watch of the state agencies, need to be addressed and redressed. And I hope there is that political will from the highest levels. We saw this demonstration from the president. I hope it will be followed by the Ministry of Interior, the National Police Service, and all other security agencies to begin a process of auditing, comprehensive or a public inquest or inquiry into the issue of goonism. Who are they? Who finances them? To what extent have they been weaponized? What agenda is driving them? And how safe are we around the election time?
Very valid point. And Doc, from what Muraya is talking about, because we are also looking at 2027, we are hoping that it's going to be a very peaceful election. Do you believe the government agencies that are mandated, because at the end of the day, it's not just some of the things that we are seeing in goonism, sometimes it begins as a hate speech, because we have National Cohesion Integration Commission, which of late has been fingered by a number of Kenyans, talking about, we need to be doing something. Politicians are spewing hatred left, right, and center from both the government and also from the opposition, heading towards the 2027 general election in regards to the agencies tasked with ensuring that we have a conducive environment to conduct our civic and cardinal duty of elections.
Thank you very much again. And just like you have said, rightly said, and also my brother Muraya, I want to believe, and this is our prayer from the church. This is the prayer that we are making, that of course the agencies, the state agencies given mandate to protect and of course to safeguard lives will also be able to safeguard lives in the right way, if I can use that word, that of course we will not see lives being lost just because of politics, just because of election or maybe post-election maybe issues or demonstrations. This is our prayer. And I want to quote my Vice Chancellor, Professor Esther Mombo. Recently, in a conference that we held on dignity and justice, she said, when dignity of human beings and justice is denied everywhere, then of course you will find that everyone is exposed probably to harm. And so I want to say that dignity is very important, justice is very important, and state agencies and officers, it's our prayer from the church. And as a clergy, I would want to pray that, of course, each one of us will get or will take their parts. The clergy will also take their part. The politicians will also take responsibility and also act justly, so that, of course, we will have a peaceful Kenya. Because we don't have another country. Kenya is our country for you and for my brother and for every Kenyan. This is our country. We are in Kenya to stay. We are in Kenya to live, and we would want to see peace and a peaceful even living, even before, during, and after elections.
Yes. Well said. Mariah, as we wrap up, I did check out what you guys do at ACES Africa Center in regards to the inclusion of the young generation, and especially the Gen Z. Also, they need to have their space. They also need to be heard. We are gearing up towards a very, very, very rigorous electioneering period. What exactly are you doing at ACES to ensure that elections, just like Doc has said, are not only free, fair, but are also credible?
Absolutely. And before I come to that, I must mention something very important here, very quickly. Allow me to, in 1 second. That what we have seen the president do with the launching of the reparation and compensation framework, we have to put it in the right context. That, number one, reparation is only one of the pillars of transitional justice. Because as we said, that is a transitional justice approach as opposed to criminal justice system approach. But the other facets of transitional justice approach include truth-telling and accountability. Truth-telling, accountability, institutional reforms, and guarantees of non-repetition. That these violations will not be repeated again. And that's what we need to see. And we also need to see the truth-telling, truth being told about what exactly happened. And we also would want to see accountability. These people who committed these violations, where are they? Should we just walk away simply because we have compensated the victims and say that the issues have been redressed, the injustice has been redressed? What happens to those particular organizations that superintended over the violations? What level of reforms have been undertaken? Or what commitment to reform are we getting from the state? That indeed we intend, with the political will that is required, with the resources that are required to reform, for instance, the National Police Service, for instance, to provide adequate resources to constitutional commissions that oversight these issues, including the the IPOA, Independent Policing Oversight Authority. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights itself has been suffering inadequate funding for a very long time that could have been designed to weaken it. These are some of the issues that we need to look at. But finally, at ACES Africa Center, we provide young people with the safe space for them to interact with security sector actors to bring out some of these issues in truth-telling before and even after the violations have happened. Because there is the need for the police to hear. There is the need for us to begin an interlocutory discussion between the police and the young people, between the national government administration and the young people, to understand this thing at, with the depth and the seriousness it requires.
Well said. That has been Karanja Muraya, who is Executive Director, ACES Africa Center, a key player in regards to our civic space and governance in the country. And just next to him, we have then Canon Dr. Scholar Wayua, who is a peace ambassador and also a university lecturer at St. Paul's University. We have been looking at safeguarding human rights based on what happened yesterday, which I say is a historic, because this has never been done in the country, but so many questions still linger. But we all need to do one thing. We also need to stay strong. We also need to also help the frameworks that are there to safeguard our rights, to do everything that pertains to the Constitution. Many thanks indeed for joining us. I'm now giving the baton to my colleague Sheila Kayaro Yogo for Kurunzi Mashinani and Tamrini. Do have yourself a blessed afternoon. I'm Bentro Njue. Karo Njoroge has been my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Let's continue this conversation on our social media spaces. Have a good one.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Can I ask you something really personal? Have you ever tried drugs before? Well, I'm sure you're going to want to hear this conversation I have with someone in Tanzania who has struggled with a drug addiction but has triumphed over it.
We smoke, then tell me that don't be afraid, don't be a fool, use this. You'll be happy when you use this, it's normal. You just use it.
So welcome to this Dala Dala, which is going to be our safe space for today's conversation. And as always, I'm your host, Chinonso Egamba, medical doctor. You might know me as a Aproko doctor. And with me today is Elizabeth, who has won her personal battle against drugs. First, I want to say I'm proud of what you've done for yourself. And I want you to also take us through your journey. How did you first get into drugs?
It was when I was in standard 6.